As our nations and structures collapse, I strongly believe the goal needs to be a focus on maximizing physical, mental, and spiritual health in the face of it all, and a recognition that these three types of health are heavily correlated and interconnected. In my opinion, the ideal is a lightness of spirit, yet coupled with a depth and breadth of spirit. In other words, a lightheartedness that isn't superficial or empty. Despite coming to disagree and part ways with Friedrich Nietzsche on several fronts, I've forever treasured some of his most powerful lines. And one of my favorites that springs to mind here is, quote, "A man's maturity consists in having found again the seriousness one had as a child at play," end quote. We don't get to choose all that happens to us throughout life, but we do have ultimate control over how we choose to process and integrate these happenings. The most healthy and robust peoples, historically speaking, found ways to steel themselves to hardship and suffering without becoming numb or losing their spirit of playfulness or adventure. This is the path, developing approaches to the world that sidestep heavy anchors and weights and dark clouds, and the recognition that so much of this is delusion. Nearly everything we dread isn't nearly as bad as we feared it might be when all is said and done. Those that live in states of stressful and anxious neuroticism create their own hells in these regards. I'm fully aware that all of this is easier said than done, especially in this environment and at such a point in history. But, of course, it's also far more important now than ever. As much as you're able, seek to draw closer to all that strengthens, improves, and elevates and better orients you, and aim to sidestep all else wherever possible. Focus on what ails us only until you feel you understand it sufficiently to help counter it or craft solutions, and not a single moment more. And to help combat this feeling of being overwhelmed, keep in mind that we're not exclusively responsible for the state of the world. Our foremost responsibility is to our own personal sphere, ourselves, our family and friends, our tribes. Do what you can, when you can, with whatever you've been given, and this is truly all that can be asked of you. You've likely heard the expression that, quote, "A harmless man is not a good man. A good man is a very, very dangerous man who has it under voluntary control," end quote. With regard to powerful archetypal emotions, anger, for example, I'm always drawn back to the chariot analogy here. Either these are wild and untamed forces, chaotically darting heedlessly on their own course, or we've found a way to harness them to help pull us more efficiently in a direction of our choosing, under our command. Unchanneled or poorly oriented forces of anger or hatred can be immensely self-destructive. Also, I think it incredibly helpful to be careful of the words we use, insofar as possible to give them some real thought and recognize their power and their shaping effect. It's so easy to spread exhaustion or nihilism or hopelessness if we're not cognizant of our communications. It may seem like some minor inconsequential thing, but I promise you it's not. Our words create our reality, of course. This doesn't mean that we can simply say everything is fine over and over as the world burns to the ground around us. And this is where so much of the modern and flighty self-help nonsense falls short, because the caveat here is that to have the purchase power and shaping force behind them, these words must also be truthful, must intuitively ring true in the ears of the listener. A statement like, "These people will never face justice," does ring true to some degree to so many listening on, because we've had such a long period of the most extreme injustice and corruption. But when one broadcasts this definitive "will never," especially anyone with a significant platform, it actually helps make this a reality. Our minds can't help but process it, integrate it, and prepare for and expect the worst accordingly. One enters a mental state of passive despondency and perceived powerlessness to the extent that it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. Of course, this doesn't mean that the words of any one person have the power to completely and immediately alter one's perspectives. But the cumulative force of many people saying similar things does have the power to lead us down such paths. And words and thoughts and ideas, like everything else, are very much contagious. For what it's worth, I'd like to see us all make a conscious effort to avoid such definitive negative proclamations anytime there's a chance they might not come to pass. To use this example of the highest level criminals never facing prosecution, do we really think that this will be the case forever? That nothing could or would ever occur in the broad stretch of time to change this dynamic? How many times in human history have similar sentiments been held by the public, only to have a cultural or political seismic shift suddenly occur to completely change the state of things? To summarize this thought, we certainly shouldn't be delusionally optimistic or idealistic to the extent that we don't see or that we misjudge the real obstacles in front of us. But I feel we should be equally careful not to lock ourselves in to this mindset that nothing ever changes and nothing can be helped, else nothing will ever change and nothing will be helped. The goal is artfully finding the most positive, truthful perspective without compromising this truthfulness in any way in the process. A critical mass of people thinking and speaking in such a way has the power to significantly change things over time, powerfully and efficiently. The theme of the next few years will likely be weathering the storm, while finding ways to help lay the foundation of what will eventually rise out of the ashes, and perhaps launching ourselves into this storm when the time is right, because another dominant theme will be a raging factional battle between parasitic elements and their botmen and mercenary armies in all spheres, and those who refuse to be cowed and seek a more healthy and just mode of living in accordance with natural and higher law. And I'm looking forward to speaking quite a bit more to these topics in the near future. Never forget that insofar as we're on God's side, God is on our side, fighting against parasitism and child predation, against the attempted destruction of biological realities like gender, and the mangling of bodies to create some abominable middle ground, the brazen rewriting of human history to stoke racial hatred and produce the most unjust playing field. All of this is evil and a temporary aberration to be soon swept away. Nature is self-healing because the perfect creative force behind it all designed it to be. This certainly doesn't mean bad things never happen or darkness never triumphs temporarily, but that in the long term, fighting against nature is always a losing battle. Ultimately, we win this. It's just a case of when and how much more of a cost we'll need to pay in collective suffering and hardship, and perhaps bloodshed on the way there. Keep your head up and avoid being gaslit into believing your beliefs represent some fringe minority. This is the core purpose of institutional capture and modern algorithms, to present a completely false picture of reality, to allow approximately 1% to pretend they're practically a majority, and that their ideas and goals represent norms and median viewpoints, to offer up the notion that they're all powerful, have mass support, and that the situation for any who oppose them really is hopeless. Just as fire is the test of gold, adversity is the test of strong men. We'll come out the other side, with so much dross and detritus burned away and left behind. Or, at the very least, our sons and daughters will. I can promise you that. I sincerely hope you're all well, and thank you for listening.